from nothing but the soil in the earth, breaking through the rocks, growing wild and tall till the buds begin to pop. So pack me in a bowl or roll me in a spliff, or you're breaking me down.
Hey, this is Ryan Herron and Amanda Breeze here to talk about all the fun stuff about one of our favorite plants, cannabis. Stick with us for updates on the industry, the most dank herb, and explorations of flavor, aroma, and effects. Hey, Amanda, how's it going today?
I'm super. How are you doing?
Okay, I thought there was more. Super excited? Just super. That's great. I
I'm
wish
so
I could be super.
super. Yeah, it's like, it's kind of a gloomy day. I'm like ready for autumn and harvest season is coming up. So I'm getting excited to just be back on the farm for a few weeks and getting sticky and hanging out with the plants. So everything's good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is not a call from the farm. So you're in Toronto right now. Is that correct?
I am in Toronto. There's a very good chance the next few episodes may be on location up where the farm is, which is a few hours out of the city. But I think that'll be fun, and hopefully the internet's good. That's, the big concern. But
Yes. I'm not sure if that episode survived, but we did a trial from the farm and it went well.
yeah, the internet was good that day. So I feel like it's a little hit or miss, but usually it's a hit.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that'll be fun. Yeah. How are you doing over there in Portland?
I'll give you some ISO wipes to like keep the resin off your lens.
Oh yeah. That's usually I put a Ziploc bag over the top and the bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there you go. That way you can watch Netflix while you are cutting plants down.
that's pretty much how it goes. I run the gamut of podcasts when I'm working. Um, and that's great. I mean, that's like the lifeline for most workers, agricultural workers. You're just like listening to nonstop podcasts. Hopefully, this one for all the other weed workers of the world. And I don't know. I don't find music super soothing when I'm working. I sort of prefer like a droning voice in the background.
I'm totally with you. I need that like parasocial relationship where I'm like, oh, I'm hearing a conversation, even if I'm like not butting into it at the moment. It's like, oh yeah, I'm listening. Music has its, like if I'm on a drive or whatever, sometimes I just gotta switch over. But dude, I'm a total podcast nerd. It was kind of interesting. Like I feel like in the last 10 years, I've seen the trimming rooms go from like communal entertainment, like Simpsons are playing or somebody's just playing some music, some jam band or whatever, to everyone has headphones in.
Yes, that I am guilty of that. I do really like a quiet, focused. I mean, the thing is, like, when you're trimming, I don't know, these days it's a little different, but before it was piecework. So, like, the more you trimmed, the more you would get paid. So, sitting there with your headphones on, not talking really could mean, an extra $100 a day, depending. Plus, also, I've seen every season of probably every show. It gets to the point where you're like, okay, we've seen everything. One of my old crews was really into medical dramas. So I've seen like every season of Grey's Anatomy, every season of House, every season of Scrub, like every season of every imaginable medical drama, to the point where we all were pretty convinced we were doctors. So like starts to get a little weird.
Yeah, but like a Zach Braff level of doctor, like nothing too serious. Like if you don't come to me with a broken bone, but if you need some bedside manner, like I'll crack a few jokes.
Well, if you're working with cannabis and then you touch your face, it's very easy to get keef or crystals in your eyes, which burns. It's horrible. And we had a stash of saline in these syringes, like needleless syringes. And so anytime someone would get keef in their eye, we would play doctor.
Nice.
And
Actually, that's a great tip. Yeah. And you're a stoner when you start packing your Visine into syringes.
yeah, it was definitely kind of one of the highlights of that season was the syringes of saline that we had access to. And that should just be a
Good tip.
standard medical kit thing on any farm, because you're always gonna at some point you're gonna touch your eye. It's danger. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's not always like a fancy eye washer there. In fact, there
yeah,
never is. I've never seen one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Or often there's no fake doctors. So lucky for us, we had many fake doctors to service the community with the saline. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Well, I mean, have you been smoking anything interesting lately or getting into anything?
You know, I last week was my birthday,
Hey,
and
happy
I
birthday.
thank you. I'm 36, getting up there.
Great.
And I decided to treat myself to some CBD bevies this week because I actually have a lot of work to do and I don't have time to be super stoned this week or taking my afternoon naps. So I tried two new bevies and they were really bad. Vibe wise, excellent. Flavor wise, horrible.
Oh,
And
too bad.
yeah, like candle, like a melted
Mm,
candle wax. They're very hard to get down, but once they're in you, great. I felt great.
great.
Cleaned my whole apartment, washed the walls. Like I went all out.
Oh,
Yeah, like washing the walls level stoned. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
That's one of
So
those projects, like, don't start it unless you want to finish it, or your walls will have like a deliberate mark where it ends and you just like gave up on the project. So, hey, good for you.
yeah, no, I just got to that nice like level of high and just scrubbed the shit out of my place. So that was good. But I learned this week something that I feel like I should have known, but didn't know. Because I was at the Grow Up conference on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah, I want to hear all about that.
It was amazing. Probably one of the best conferences I've ever been to. And
Wow.
you and I probably both attend a lot of these corporate weed conferences. It was fantastic. It's cool because it was really inspired and started in pre-legalization and has now moved forward. So a
Cool.
lot of the guests and speakers and reps are just like people, not corporations. And of course,
Right.
they're representing companies, they're representing brands, but they're not these like big multinational. I don't know. It's not as corporate as other conferences I've been to. It really felt like a community of people operating in the legal industry. A lot of them were from the legacy market. So it was just like really cool vibes, really cool conversations. Yeah, a big topic here right now is canna tourism. That's sort
Sure.
of huge on the table
Mhm.
because our very, very strict regulations are extremely limiting things people can do here. So it's not really making Canada the Canada destination that everyone was thinking it would be when legalization occurred.
Right, right, exactly. And I had been to sort of like gray market shops in Vancouver where you could go in and just like smoke in a coffee shop kind of a thing. And if you needed weed, there was somebody there who was willing to like pass you a business card, right? And it was just easy enough that tourists had access to it. And that was great. That was like a reason enough for me to go visit the city. And now, like here in Portland, there's the Clean Air Act, which is, wreaking havoc and trying to start social lounges, things like that, where employees can't be exposed to secondhand smoke at all, which just makes things
Oh,
interesting.
wow.
Yeah. So, what are the limitations there in your province?
Well, we have very similar law. It's called Smoke Free Ontario,
Great.
and it passed a few years ago. And it's the kind of like no smoking indoors, no smoking 7 feet from a building. And so they even banned smoking on patios at bars. And not just weed, any cigarette smoke is really what the base of the law is for.
Sure.
So that is a huge implication on cannabis businesses who want to have, consumption lounges is what they're calling them here. And so yeah, we're very limited in what the legal framework can do. But what a lot of folks were saying was that the difference between Canada and the States is that Americans are willing to kind of break the laws
Yeah.
or work outside. Let's call it working outside of them.
Sure.
Instead of what a lot of folks here are doing, which is trying so hard to work in this very limited framework. And so it's really limited the stuff that we're doing here. I guess what they were kind of saying is like the Americans are taking more chances and putting themselves out there more. And I'm thinking it's because of the legal status of cannabis there, being still kind of gray, legal in some places, not legal in others, but kind of cool. CBD's around. Like, I just feel like it's sort of the environment lends itself to working outside of legal frameworks there. Whereas here, when you're thinking, oh, well, it's totally legal, so let's make it work in that, but it's actually not, because we're so limited. So social spaces aren't legal right now at all. And with the edible limitation of 10 milligrams, that's another huge blow to the consumption community who maybe wants to host like private events or dinners, stuff in bars, having cannabis cocktails available.
Mhm.
It's just become, there's just like so many rules to follow. So a big trend right now is private events. If it's a private event, you can kind of do a workaround and sort of serve whatever you like. So that's kind of cool, but that's not super accessible to tourism either.
Right. So are you seeing some sort of like private lounges at all where, if you have a membership, then you can go in and smoke inside?
No.
Yeah, that's too bad. There's like a handful of those here. I don't think any of them have really had the success they need to keep things going. I know the world's Northwest Cannabis Cafe, I think it was called. Northwest Cannabis Club, right? They were just paying Clean Air Act fines anytime the inspector would come in, and it was just incredibly expensive. And so eventually they just said, okay, hands are up. We can't keep doing this. So yeah, it's a weird piece of the puzzle for the cannabis industry that I am so surprised is taking so long, right? And banking here too, federal banks won't touch cannabis. So you're lucky if a credit union wants to do business with you.
Right.
And that's just so wild. And it leads people to like storing up a year's worth of tax dollars, like in a safe somewhere. Also not safe. These are just things that I feel like are really lagging if we want this industry to be successful, to employ more people, to like, hey, like contribute more taxes. Like I've seen a lot of talk of like cannabis hotels or cannabis friendly hotels, and I haven't really seen anything like it. I know there's a Jupiter's Next hotel here in Portland has like a cannabis friendly patio. And that's pretty progressive considering, that most other hotels will give you a hefty fine for smoking.
Yeah, that's actually one of the founder of High B&B was one of the panelists at Grow Up.
Okay, nice.
She's very cool. She was part of the Canna Tourism panel, which, yeah, I obviously attended because this is something kind of for the reasons you're listing, like there's no opportunities for employment. And a report just came out that more than a third of dispensaries will be closing this year in Ontario.
Wow.
And so I've been thinking a lot about like people who want careers in cannabis are not being given opportunities to find work, especially with no tourism opportunities and retail being really the only reason for this to be a destination. You're going to come here and go shopping. So so she was there, High B&B was there. And one of the points that she made was that in the States, one of the most sought after things is cannabis accommodations, cannabis friendly hotels, cannabis friendly Airbnbs, places people can stay and smoke, because it's still so illegal in most places to smoke in public in the States. Whereas here, what more people are looking for is cannabis experiences, because we have no fear of just walking down the street and smoking a joint, or going to a park and smoking a joint. We don't need the accommodations. We need the entertainment. So
Sure.
that was like a big difference. And I thought that was, we're neighbors, but it's just so funny to me to think about that. People are looking for these different things in different countries.
Right. Well, and the experience there, lends itself to enhancing the entire tourism industry, right? If you can say this coastal town is cool, but now it's known for this like specific terroir OG that everyone loves, and you go to the beach and there's like pre-roll shops and you just load up and walk the beach and smoke it. Like, oh, okay, now I know what I'm doing for spring break. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that like there's so many opportunities for that. And then the fact that like the businesses in the psychedelic space might actually beat us to these experiential lounges is pretty wild, right? Like I'm all for kicking back in a really safe environment with some like cool music, but I'm also like cool with eating a handful of mushrooms and going to the Meow Wolf installation. And if we can get somewhere in between and I can just go there and get a couple of dabs at the bar, like, great, that's my afternoon. I'm totally down.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up Meow Wolf because like this is one of the things we're going to talk about today, Canada tourism. I was on a trip to the States this year and I only had a few weeks, and Meow Wolf was totally on my list. Would I go on psychedelics? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Did I have a good time not on psychedelics? Also, yes, that place is very, very cool. So yeah, we're gonna get into that a bit today, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, let's get there. Like, let's talk a little bit about your trip. I know you just put up the blog post on Colorado. So
Yes.
let's just dive into the market there. What did you see? And that's probably the best of your trip, right?
I would say it was the best of my trip. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's Denver, it's
Yeah.
Colorado. I lived in the States for years, right? So I've been to every state except like Puerto Rico and
Yes.
Hawaii. I've spent at least a week in every state, and I have my favorites. Oregon, definitely top three, big fan.
Cool. Glad I'm here.
And when you're talking about smoking pre-rolls down the beach, I immediately go to Manzanita. I love Little
Yeah.
Manzanita Beach Town. I would go there right now, buy a pack of pre-rolls and hang out for the whole day. That's one of my favorite places.
And really, I'll just interrupt. I totally double down on that. I think it's great. There's like the tiniest shop there with like the best people and the best products that I was like amazed. I was out on this little coastal town and their shelves were just like full of the best herb. Yes, it's a really special place. So go out there and don't ruin it.
I haven't been there when they had a dispensary. So that's actually really cool. I just used to frequent the taco place. And I lived on the beach for many years on and off right there. It's one of my favorite places. So yeah, the States has a special place in my heart because I've seen a lot of it and I love really a lot of these little pockets. I have been to Colorado before. So all the places I went on my trip, I've been to before, but this time I was going, looking for the weed in a different way.
Yeah.
Because
With a
I'm
critical eye. Yes.
a critical eye. I was looking for flavor. I was looking for cool dispensaries. Prior to going to Denver, I went for a wedding. So I already had stuff that I had to do in places that I like had to be, but I had a solid week to adventure. So I was like, I have got to have a plan because I'm going to hit the best spots. And it was actually surprisingly difficult to find things to do, considering Denver is like considered a cannabis tourism destination. There were like a few bus tours that took you to like a glass blowing studio and like a dispensary tour, but none of this really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
They're not cheap.
Right.
And something about paying for a bus to go to stores.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe it's good for some people, but yeah. You're gonna miss the adventure.
If I was staying in Denver for longer, maybe spending a day visiting 10 dispensaries would be great. And you buy something from each one, and then you have a week's worth of product and you just enjoy it. But because, my trip was so condensed, that didn't really appeal to me. I saw one bar that sold CBD drinks that I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to check that out. They're not even open yet. So there's stuff on the horizon, but at the moment, 2022, the culture of cannabis is very similar Toronto to Denver. It's a retail experience pretty much. So nonetheless, I shortlisted the dispensaries that I was like, I've got to go to these ones.
Cool.
One was called Apothecary Farms, two thumbs down, did not enjoy, bad vibes all around.
Oh
Um,
no.
yeah, I just wasn't it it wasn't very friendly.
Okay, that's a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate to say it because I don't expect retail workers to be stoked 24/7 at all. I've worked retail. I don't expect that, but I just wanted, their website really pumped up the shop. So I was expecting more. It wasn't just the staff, it was the shop, it was the products, it was just the whole vibe. I bought nothing. So I was
Ooh.
like, no. And they're one of the top dispensaries in Colorado. So I was like, huh.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll say it's an off day, but yeah, I hear you on all of that.
Yeah, and they mostly were selling concentrates, which is fine. But it just wasn't anything super. I don't know. So that place was okay, but luckily for me, Cookies is right down the street. So Cookies, have you ever been to a Cookies?
Yeah, I've been to a couple different cookie shops. Yes.
Okay, like where?
Oh, here in Portland, and then in LA, I believe, somewhere on
Okay.
my LA trip, we stopped in at the Jungle Boys and Cookies and checked out all those retail shops.
Yeah, I kind of knew what to expect because they're all very similar.
Yep.
But I'm like, Cookies and in the one in Denver, like Snoop Dogg's been there. So I was like, well, if Snoop Dogg shopped there, I gotta shop here too. And they had a Snoop Dogg party pack, but of course they were sold out. I mean,
That's so
I'm sure there
funny.
was a lineup to buy them. I was like ready for it too. Yeah, they only sold products in eighths, which is okay. It was kind of my last day there, so it was like just had to pick one thing at that point, and I went with the pink rosé. Caught my eye right away. It was such a light aroma, and the flavor was amazing, and it packed such a punch. And I rolled the biggest fatty, ripped it, and totally went to Meow Wolf for like
Nice.
3 hours.
Very
Yeah,
good. Yeah. So was it packed in Mylar or a jar?
it was the bags. It was a
Yeah.
Mylar bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do
Totally.
they do jars also?
I have seen eighths packed into jars around here, but maybe not at the cookie shop. I think it's all Mylar there, which is probably what that like consumer wants. And I've bitched about Mylar in the past. I've kind of come around to it. I think especially if you're in a market where you can't look directly at the herb you're going to buy, then it's a fair way to kind of like sell your brand.
Yeah, see, it really works for you guys because you can advertise cool stuff on the packages. We use Mylar here, but you can't actually put anything on the bag. So it's generally just like a block of color, a teeny tiny little logo, and like a little description. So it's
Mm.
really a waste here. We do sell a lot of stuff in jars, but they're actually often not recyclable because they use a lot of colored glass here. That's like opaque. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a whole thing. But Cookies, 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. And once I got back to Toronto, they had just opened a flagship store here. So I'm thinking of checking it out, one of these days. And
Yeah,
doing
please do. I'd love to compare the cultivars on the shelves there to what we have here. Because they're going to have their signature clone only cultivars, and who knows how they are sharing those or making that happen. But they have, right? And it would be interesting to see what's on the shelves for which market.
absolutely.
These huge brands, there was a report that just came out, or it was not a report, actually. It was an SOP from a Florida dispensary that was leaked. And it basically said the higher THC flower will be shelved in the back and the lower THC flower will be put out first. And everyone's like, well, what the hell? You're like purposely selling us mids. And it's like, well, kind of, yeah, because if we put the 30 percenters out there, that market there is really new and still learning that THC is not everything. See our first episode. And so that's what all they're buying. And then the really nice 22% herb just sits there and oxidizes and gets old. And so it's now like, okay, hey, let's clear this out. And then we can put the higher stuff on the shelves, which does feel kind of punishing to a consumer that's only chasing THC. And I agree, it's like maybe not the best way to like make your dispensary look great by like holding back the good stuff and letting that oxidize and get older. The good stuff, finger quotes for anyone who's listening to the podcast. But you know, that was that. People were pretty mad about it, but I guess from like a dispensary manager point of view, I get it.
I'm gonna have to digest that a little bit, because I just feel like when with so many dispensaries to choose from, if I go to one and I can only find, and I want a high THC and I can only find low, probably won't go back again. If I go to one and I find a high THC and its quality has been degraded, I probably won't go back. So I feel like as a connoisseur, which not everyone is, but people are going to notice, people are learning quality.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that's a good business move. It's certainly an interesting choice and one approach to take, but I probably wouldn't go back in either scenario.
Right. Well, and I have seen firsthand that there are, at least here in Oregon, so many options of what to do with your flower, right? If it's really top tier, then sell it at the market for a top tier price, right? Grade it appropriately. If it's getting old, fire sale it off somewhere, pre-packed ounces. If it's doesn't look very pretty and the dispensaries don't want to buy it, but it tastes amazing, put it into some pre-rolls, right? If it doesn't taste very great and smokes a little wonky, like, but the flavor is pretty nice, make some edibles with it. Like, there's a million ways to kind of grade those pounds and treat them appropriately. So when I see someone doing some kind of like dumb back of the napkin math that's like hide the THC percentages until lower is sold, and like it bums me out because it really does not respect the consumer. And for the most part, it's just like, okay, this is what we'll do to I don't even want to say maximize profits, because you're right, like you're degrading your customer loyalty when you do moves like that.
And this actually touches on something I learned at Grow Up this week, which was around R&D, like research and development of products. And, I've come on a few episodes so far and talked about tasty bevies. I love my bevy category. And, today I talked about one that was not so good. And what I learned this week is that Canadian companies will have the licensing to manufacture something like an edible, gummy, drink, it doesn't matter, edible category. And they'll be able to produce them, formulate, produce, put them on the shelves. But you need a separate license for tasting the product, which is yes, this is absolutely real. And all this time, I think it was last week, I went off about how could anyone say this was a tasty thing? Like, this tasted so horrible. And it's because no one was allowed to try it before it went to market. This is real. This is a real thing.
It stresses me out.
It finally makes sense. Like, at least I had like this, oh man, this makes so much sense why these products are disgusting and taste horrible. It's because no one tried them.
Oh, I just imagine the like flavor scientist or the creator that like did the math on the product, like waiting at the like local dispensary for the product to hit the shelf so they could try it the first time and go, oh, damn it, and run back to the drawing board for the next round.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And, this always comes up because it's always something that I think about. And that is like product MOQs, like how the minimum order quantities on things like cans, or packaging or shrink wrap or any of these things, right? And often you're ordering them 50,000 at a time, right? Usually more, because, you know, the more you order, the cheaper you get, and everyone's trying to maximize their profits here. So anytime you have to like say, oh, you know, we're not using yuzu anymore, we're using tangerine, it's like trash all those labels, right? And like literally trash them, put them in the trash. They're not usually recycled for anything. So it's a bummer anytime that those types of things have to just be like part of the process of creating the product, or like, hey, we've changed the regulations, so all of your labels have to change. It's like that's a big ship to like start turning around and printing off more labels. So anyway,
Yeah,
I'm
or
always thinking about that.
you know, having to take an entire product that you've spent months formulating completely off the market. Like, I imagine this breezy peach basil that I had last week that really just was so foul. Is just they're going to sell what they have and then they're never going to produce it again because it obviously didn't clear customers' tastes and it didn't really make sense as a flavor because it didn't, nothing, the distillate wasn't masked. None of the flavors were masked. And so it ended up being this very waxy, disgusting overall effect. And I think it's a huge detriment to customers as well. This is another example of the industry not really putting customers first. It's not the brand's fault in this case. It's working under this legal framework that we have where no one's tasting anything until it's already gone to market. And that's actually why I believe a lot of American brands, like some of the beverages that I like some of the flour and especially edibles, are really some of the biggest brands on the Canadian market right now are coming from the States.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see that 18 of the top 15 multi-state operators here, 8 of the top 15 had originated here in Oregon. So, you know, it was one of those early, like easy to license type markets where everyone kind of came and it became like a really nice incubator. So it's cool to see some of the quality stuff spreading far and wide, right? And not just from people shipping them because they like wild gummies or whatever.
And that's the thing, you know, Wild's a great example. They have great branding. They're everywhere. If you ever attend an event, they're always got a table there. They always give out samples of their non-infused products, which is like a nice little snacky. Well, here they can't give out infused, so they do non-infused.
Yeah.
So you get
I
a
think
little
they
bit.
do that everywhere. I have not, it's maybe Hall of Flowers will give you like a package, but they're not like just handing out the milligrams.
Yeah, so same, but it always tastes good. And, you know, they've really developed their product. So when you try the uninfused sample, it's so comparable to the infused sample. You're not shocked with this like gross flavor afterwards. And they've just had the opportunity to work in a completely different legal framework to craft a really quality consumer product that Canadian brands are just not getting the opportunity to do unless they want to just put millions into getting these R&D licenses, which eventually they will have to do to compete with American brands who already have everything locked down, formulas on lock, flavors on lock, to the point where they're coming up with new ones that are equally as successful as their classics.
Yeah, I think we're in almost like a third wave of cannabeverages here because early on we saw just like people messing with things, poorly emulsified soda waters, ginger beers, that kind of thing. It was really like kind of homespun. And then bigger brands like Lagunitas down in California like took it and ran with it with their it's like a hop water, I believe, that's got a THC percentage. So, you know, it's like a beer analog. And since then, a lot of the competitors then have died off and kind of overestimated like the beverage consumption market. And now we're seeing those numbers like really climb as consumers are like building awareness on this product category, getting super excited about it. And now people like which you've talked favorably about in the past, can come in and say, great, we've got this like lemon lavender flavor. We know that it works. We can source our cannabinoids in a way that where they're not going to impart these like awful flavors that distillate can do, or like poorly, I don't know, cleaned distillate can do. And then they've got a successful product that's just like ready for a market that's hungry for it. So I think it's just going to be something we see more and more of.
Can is all over the shelves here. They're still one of my top go-to bevies. Um, they've just really done well with their flavors. And I've also been to events where they're handing out samples of non-infused. And again, the non-infused tastes exactly like the infused. You're not surprised when you get home and open the package. It's exactly what you were expecting. If it says lemon lavender, that's what you're going to get. This week I tried like a guava and something else. It was a 20-to-1 CBD to THC.
Oh,
So,
really? Okay.
and this is what got me through my crazy house cleaning. But yeah, it was a 20-to-1. So I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. And it did not taste like guava. There was no fruit. There was absolutely nothing in there. It just tasted like slightly carbonated candles. It was so bad.
Right.
And I'm just now I know it's because they're Canadian and limited in their tasting and testing. And so it's just it's interesting because when I was at Grow Up, that was the panel I was participating in, was the tasting and testing panel. And that was one of the big questions that came up, was people really want to know if there's any easy way to get through to be able to do those types of processes on their products. And I was sitting there with another rep, Sherry from Can Delta. She's very cool, very knowledgeable, knows everything about the legal side of cannabis. So we were like it was a good panel. There was another cannabis sommelier on the panel, and just everyone just had a really great perspective on tasting and testing. But the things that Sherry was saying was just I had no idea that these brands were having to go through so much. And the other tasting category is the cannabis tasting category, which, because of these non-smoking laws and these strict regulations on smoking from Health Canada, on top of the tasting R&D regulations, the number of brands that have indoor or outdoor tasting facilities is like 3.
Yeah.
That's nuts. It's so crazy to me that you can have a product. I'm leaning in here. You can have a product.
Let's hear it.
Something be illegal forever, and you finally legalize it, but you can't taste it and you can't test it. How did that legal framework ever make it through to the end? There was no tasting or testing on that either. We're lacking this.
It's so weird. It's almost meant to be punitive, because you cannot tell a farmer who's been out there watching the tomatoes develop from a little seed or a clone into these big, beautiful heirlooms and not taste it. You know what I mean? It's going to drive their decisions, but it's also like the fruit of their labor. So let them get in there, and there are certain quality control samples you can take here and separate those out in metric. It's not something where you can just go break a branch and enjoy it, at least not legally. So it's kind of interesting to see that it's a little bit easier here, maybe a lot easier, but still a pain in the ass, right? And I think, at least in Canada, this might be more successful, where you have a flavor house with the right licenses, and you can go to them and say, hey, develop these 5 products for me, and then I'm going to make sure I'm using my extracts or concentrates to whatever parameters you give us to create these products. Then, hey, maybe you have a better chance at success. The spaces I've seen like that here in Oregon are really more of like an incubator, where a bunch of businesses might come in and have someone kind of process their products for them. Like an edible company might say, hey, this commercial kitchen, you guys are much better at doing this than we are. We don't want to mess with the hiring and firing and everything. We just produce our cookies for us. And they'll do some development, but it's not really their main gig. You know what I mean? So I've seen those kind of models be successful on a small scale. but I think that it might take some of these like larger Lagunitas types to create successful products that are like really hit the market in a way where everyone is happy.
Yeah, I think there's some, and it actually, there were some pros and cons of this whole situation. The con is that if we can't taste and test our products, we're going to have shit products on the market. For us Canadians, we're not going to be able to compete in a global cannabis marketplace under our legal framework. We're holding back on tourism. We're holding back on all these money makers that people want, the jobs that people want. But we're not even able to take it that step further, which is testing the experience of the product, right? Like at this point, we're just talking about flavor. We're not even talking about studying the true effects of the thing that has all these amazing effects on the body. So we can't, step one is like, we can't even taste it. Step two is like, what is it even doing? Right? We need further testing. We need more opportunities. So this is, a future forward moment. This is probably what's going to press people who are really enthusiastic about activism and reshaping legal laws. And I'm fully there. I'm totally behind all this stuff. And so there's this whole side of things here. For us, you and I, this is actually kind of a nice position to be in, because the one thing we can do is smell the thing and talk about the smell. So I actually felt very positively at the end of that, because it's the one thing people can and are doing.
There you go. This is all fucked up, but my nose works. So hey, there's the silver lining.
The silver lining is that as of right now, smell is and continues to be the big differentiator between different strains and different products on the market. And so for folks who are really enthusiastic about aroma, this is our moment to shine. And part of my presentation on the tasting and testing panel was talking a lot about this cannabis as a constellation, and that there's ways we can describe the aroma that allude to its effects, that allude to the experience, without overstepping any legal framework or making any claims. We can, instead of saying something is stimulating, we could throw it into, maybe it's cheerful, right? There's other cool adjectives. There's other cool vibes that we can start presenting to products. So I felt really good about that side of things. And, a lot of talk about terpenes at the Grow Up To. A lot of people are so curious and looking for resources to learn more, especially like a lot of brands and growers. For folks like us who have done growing and have experience on farms, but also have experience on the more sommelier side of things, some people don't have that depth of experience, and they just really grow really good weed, but might not have the vocabulary to back it up in terms of describing its aromas.
Oh, absolutely. And I find it's more difficult being surrounded by 100 plants all day, every day, smelling them from when it just smells like soil or rock wool or whatever you're using, to the point where the flower's developing, you're getting all those like super early scents, to breaking it down, because your nose is not necessarily trained to be like, what's the most enjoyable notes of this? It's like, is there mold going on here? It has enough moisture left this plant that I can seal it up in the way that I want to, right? Why is this plant smell different than the other when they were right next to each other? It's the same strain. Like your brain is like geared to find issues in the products that you need to, survive. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we're over here on the like hedonistic end of the spectrum, where we're like, ooh, grape and cream. Which is nice, because I do feel like you need both of those things, especially for a top tier product, right? And the cool thing for us and for people like us is we're in the very early stages of still defining what these things are, right? I mean, the French perfume movement took 100 years to assign and create some of these words that are now like modern jargon for perfume makers who use this stuff on a daily basis. So that's cool. Like we're creating what will eventually be standardized, but still is all over the place.
Absolutely. And we have a long way to go, especially when we go into more nuanced aromas like terroir and trying to discover regional smells and flavors. And that's something that people are really, really keen on. But in order to see the differences, the subtle differences, and identify those by the region, we need a base profile to sort of work off of. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that still needs to be done in cannabis, the study of cannabis aromatics to get us there. But as of right now, it's sort of all a lot of people can do. So I'm really hoping that that my portion of the panel was inspiring to the LPs that were in the crowd, and they're really keen on bringing in some aroma nerds to really take a hard look at some of their products and start to differentiate some of the more quality aromatics to some of the sort of more average products, and we can start bringing in some new stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and hey, check it out. If you are a producer and you have the benefit of being able to inform your consumers about what you feel the flavor notes are, right now, if you do a good job with that, you can increase the price of your pound of your product easily, just by conveying that little bit of information that you would find on the back of a coffee bag, right? Cherries, stone fruit, barnyard, boom, right? Oh, hey, when I'm getting my nose in this, I'm getting those 3 easily connectable, conveyable scents. Barnyard's kind of vague, so no one's going to call you out on it if it's not totally there. Cherry is though, so don't fuck that one up. But if you do that and you can communicate to the buyer, this is the profile you're looking for, and this is the experience that you should expect. Boom, you can now charge more for your product just by better communicating what the consumer or the buyer can expect. So, I mean, multiply that by 100 strains and like, hey, you just bought yourself a new boat. It's easy to bring on someone who does sensory analysis for a living or is really good at it or has a way with words to do that, you know? And it kind of goes against what we were saying about eroding your customers' trust, because in that way, you're like, you're making a pal. Like, oh, hey, we had a connection. I did sip that espresso and get cedar wood out of it. Holy cow. So if you told me that and then I found it, okay, now I know I'm going to go back to like Roseline Coffee because they get me and I get them.
absolutely. I love that. And that's hopefully next steps. You know, it's going to be a long winter, so we have a lot of time for all these LPs to just huff away and start to, you know, bring in the right people to get those profiles going, because that is 100% true. And that is what kind of is going to make the difference and bring a standout product to the market, more so than our, you know, the past THC percentages that people loved so much.
Yeah, and you know, Select has made a really huge brand from just having super clean packaging. It looks like something that your mom would pick up from the dispensary on her first trip there. And I think there are some brands that would really benefit using that to their advantage, being in that space, saying, you know, really pleasant things about the pink rose instead of trying to put like a dripping bubble letter cartoon on the front of the package here in the States, right?
Exactly, because that's what I'm saying. Exactly that. You know, the other thing I wanted to talk about today was another one of those legalization versus non-legalization moments, Canada versus the US here. Because yes, I was in Colorado on my trip, but I was also in some non-legalized states. And as much as I can critique legalization, what I also learned was how vastly it improves the quality of everything related to cannabis across the board. It makes legalization, I didn't have such an appreciation for it until I entered the non-legalized states. And I've been in the States, I worked in California. I always had California cannabis on me, even in non-legal states. You know, you just stash it right. We won't talk about that. But anyway, we go into these non-legalized states now, and I'm there in a different mindset. I'm there looking for products. I want to see what they're selling, what's on the market. Obviously, Colorado had some of, the cookies and the other dispensaries. I had a great time there. Mostly high THC, by the way. That's why I'm thinking of this. That's still kind of their thing in the smaller spots. That's okay. But then a hop, skip, and a jump to Tennessee, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania.
There we go. Totally different markets.
The other half of my trip, I actually flew into Tennessee, and my goal was to immediately go to a dispensary. So as soon as I got there, I found one minutes from the airport in Nashville. And the thing is, non-legalized states are selling cannabis. They have dispensaries. They have these shops. They're everywhere, but they're not selling weed at all. What they're selling is synthetic weed.
Oh, shivers down my spine.
Yes. And synthetic weed looks like weed, kind of tastes like weed, costs the same, and comes in the same packaging. And you would really never know that it wasn't actually weed. So this is sort of the dark side of, what's happening down south here. When I flew in, I found this dispensary, and it was like THCO, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. I've been hearing about this all over social media. They're calling it the psychedelic cannabinoid. They're calling it stronger than THC. They're calling it one of the minors, like, we would consider a CBG or a CBN. They're putting it in that category. And I'm thinking to myself, how in a decade have I never come across this? How in the past decade of smoking and working and being in this industry and legalization in Canada, it's not in any dispensaries? Like, that's so weird. And I'm not really making this connection that it's not here because it's not real.
Yeah.
We sell real weed here. That is the main perk of legalization. And so THCO, THCP, THCV, or they're all over the states in these non-legalized states. But it's basically these synthetic cannabinoids that they extract from like a Delta 8 variant, from legal hemp. And then they do this like molecular scientific process called isomerization. And then they add this chemical to it, which they actually use to make explosives. And then they form it into this crude oil, which is then the hemp flower is then dipped into.
Oh, yum.
And that is what THCO is. Hemp flower dipped in this crude oil that has never been proven to be safe for human consumption. But the thing is, it's flavorless and odorless. So when I purchased THCO flower, because I did buy
You
some.
got to do the science when you're there.
I like to do the science. So I bought some, and it smelled lemony. It was a little artificial, but I'm like, sometimes terpenes come off as artificial. And at that point, I didn't actually know what it was. I did the research when I got back to where I was staying, but they're adding botanical terpenes. So that any aroma you're getting off of it is just added terpenes to make it seem more like what it's supposed to be, which is cannabis. So yeah, dipped in terpenes, dipped in this crude oil, and it's super toxic. None of these companies that are producing it are willing to put any research to back up their claims. And essentially what we have in non-legalized states right now is a better marketed version of spice.
People who would completely avoid spice are smoking this stuff because it's what's available to them. And I remember when THCO was hitting like the news wire, like when it was going out and people were saying it's 10 to 26 times stronger than normal THC. That's debatable. We'll see, right? But a friend shared an article about how at high temperatures, like dabbing and smoking temperatures, THCO acetate can convert into basically oil, right? And the issues with the whole vape scare from a couple of years ago were these vaporized oils just wrecking people's lungs. And so they were saying like products like that do have those same kinds of risks. And so it is a real bummer that they're using these essentially legal loopholes to sell a hemp product and then be like, but we zhuzhed it up a little bit with some converted molecules. It's like gross. Like you are smoking spice at that point, right? Even if there was a Kool-Aid man on the front of the pack.
That's exactly what it is. It's a legal loophole. The 2018 Farm Bill banned any products over, is it 0.3, 0.03?
Yeah, either 0.3 or 0.03. I forget. I want to say 0.3 because that sounds more generous. So it's probably
Yeah.
0.03, which is insane.
So anything, basically anything with any level of THC
There you
is banned. And so because this doesn't actually contain any THC, it's legal. And that it's legalized poison is essentially what it is, legalized poison. And so it's crazy to me that this farm bill would pass to allow people something far more dangerous than the actual sun-grown, lovingly grown cannabis itself. And these synthetic cannabinoids are being sold everywhere.
Right.
And
oftentimes with a label that says like not for consumption or something like that, like for sold as incense or sold as novelty or, something along those lines. And, just like back in the day, we would go to the head shop and everything would say for tobacco use only. And it's like
right.
the giant bubbler, right?
Yeah. And so it's that was very scary. And to me, that's like another reason to push legalization across the board in the States.
We're seeing California introduce bills that are directly aimed at exporting cannabis. And I think not even just to other states, but just over state lines. And then like, hey, if we need to sell it to Thailand or Germany or wherever, great. And even if those first few bills fail, like we know, like this is happening. This is going to happen. Everyone's too excited about it. And you're very right to be thinking about the future market and what Canada could be doing to be at the forefront of it instead of lagging, right? And I think, because it seems to be everyone's concern that like addiction or cannabis use is going to be like a problem if we make these laws a little more lenient, like, oh, okay, then we can work around that, right? And we can contribute to those foundations and systems and programs, right? That can help people with addiction. Sure, great, let's do that.
Like, what's the alternative? People are smoking THCO. That's the alternative where it's like in action, this thing. And there was like, I think in the news in Connecticut, 100 deaths or almost deaths related to synthetic cannabinoids. Like it's in the news, it's in the media, it's totally poison. I smoked it. I tried a little bit just for a little flavor. I tried spice too back in 2012 when everyone had that circulating around, for science. But it's disgusting, and it's people are smoking it every day. For me, it was one little hoot just to see what the heck is this thing, what does it taste like. For other people, that's access to what they consider their cannabis medicine. And California and Canada, NorCal, we have the Emerald Triangle, Humboldt County, world-renowned place, destination for cannabis. Here with BC, obviously BC bud. It's a huge thing. Everyone in the world knows about it. You have your, Moroccan hash, there's Amsterdam, but there's these places that have the thing and they want to share it, but it's still circulating. It's getting around, but through black markets. So we might as well just bring it all together, just accept the reality. And I think this California law is awesome because I heard from a friend who lives in the Netherlands that a big thing there is actually selling popular strains from Canada and the States at a premium.
Ah, nice.
So, like, if I went to Amsterdam, I would say, what's local? I want to try the local flavor. But if you live in Amsterdam or the Netherlands or in the area, you would go and say, what have you brought in from North America? Do you have any California strains? Do you have any Canadian strains? And they're selling like a gram for like $45 or more. Like
Ooh,
crazy,
ooh.
crazy prices on like the classics, like Girl Scout cookie, Northern Lights, the whole nine. So you could also, I guess if you're an expat, you can get a little taste of home for
That's like the $12 Mountain Dew I think I paid for in Amsterdam in 2002 or whatever. It's like, whoa, you have that here? How much is it? Who cares?
yeah.
Yeah, so hey, that's cool. I mean, as soon as I'm feeling like a little cookies out or whatever, I'm surprised by the flavors I've been gravitating toward these days. Tend to be more of that profile, maybe with a little like chem funk thrown in there. I don't know. Those flavors always are super potent to me, so that's what I've been gravitating towards lately. Um, but yeah, I mean, weed is a global phenomenon. There are localized cultures that we should celebrate by doing more than just like putting Humboldt on the front of a Mylar. Um, if you want these like experiences for tourism, like they're there. You have to be like an adventurous Amanda who's like wants to go to all 50 states and be like, okay, who's got the underground Airbnb in Alaska that's gonna let me like chief joints? It's like cool, like that's available. That's a lifetime memory right there. But like, can we go to like letting these places like open up and advertise? And then there's like a fat joint for you, like laying on your pillow at night, and it says like, sleepy time tea, grown by farmer whoever up the road. We're so close to that. We really are. So I think it's kind of fun, like time capsuling this episode and listening to it in a few years and being like, we have all of those things now. Like people are smelling the weed before they sell it and tasting the drinks before they hit the market. And I can book an Airbnb that is like in the middle of a pot farm. And I learned about it from a flyer at the airport when I touched down. Like,
Yeah, can't wait for the build a beverage store where I could just go in
oh,
and
yes.
make myself my little infused bevy 6-pack to go and keep the vibes rolling. I Toronto just opened a dispensary in Union Station. Union Station is our like transportation hub. It's like right in the core of Toronto. So like if you're taking a bus in or if you're taking a train or whatever, this is like the main. It's huge. It's like beautiful. It kind of actually looks like my wallpaper. It's just like it's got a vibe. It's ginormous. And so this is like a transportation hub of our city. And it just opened its first dispensary, which of course I went on opening day because I was like, heck yeah, I got to see this.
Yes.
Because those are the things that make places cannabis tourist destinations, like landing in Colorado and them having a dispensary in the airport at Denver International Airport. I was like, holy shit, that's awesome. Of course, my flight was delayed. Of course, I didn't get to go in because it was past midnight when I got there.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry, but
I
that's very cool. Put it on the list for next time. Yes.
next time I fly in, I'm definitely going there. But like places like that, we don't have that here. Toronto International Airport, I want to say it's even bigger than Denver. Not trying to throw any shade, maybe they're comparable, but it's big. Where the heck is the dispensary when you land here? Union Station, great first start. So like, yeah, things are definitely
All right.
happening.
Okay. If I can go to the airport and drink 6 Bloody Marys at 8:30 in the morning, and then there's also a little like outdoor smoking lounge. It's like fenced in and through security or whatever. Please, can we just put the dispensary right there? And I'll sign a piece of paper that says I'm not leaving the premises with this.
Yeah.
Sure. And I'll sit there and my flight can be delayed till tomorrow. I'll just smoke joints. That's great. And plug my phone in and watch Netflix. And like that would be a pretty nice airport experience. And I promise you, I'm gonna cause less fights than if I drank 6 Bloody Marys. I'm gonna buy more magazines and snacks. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a docile little sleepy guy on the plane that you don't have to worry about. You probably don't even have to pour me a beverage because I'm snoozing at that point.
Right? It's a long-term money saver. Listen, my flight was delayed and I was flying, I think, Nashville to Denver, and they did have a smoking room, but obviously it's Nashville. It wasn't for weed. You can't smoke weed in there. But I was like, man, I have a lot of time to kill here and no weed
Oof.
and nothing to do. It was just like it sucked. It's just, I'm not a drinker at all. So I just had to sit there and, wait. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. And I always, if I'm at the airport, typically have a vape on me, separate the battery, separate the cartridge, keep them away from each other, combine them again. Hey, you're in good shape, right? If there is like an area out there where you can step out and catch a puff or two, no one seems to ever mind that you're out there with your little vape, because people tend to have these monster vapes now that are much more obtrusive. And so, getting high at the airport is already nice. Let's make it a whole thing and encourage people to buy cupcakes on the other side, exit through the gift shop kind of a thing.
That's totally the vibe. Okay, listen, as soon as they open an airport smoking spot, you and me, we're going to fly there. I don't care where it is, we're going.
I'm down. I'm going to set my Google alerts, and on the cheapest flight I can grab,
Yeah.
I'll meet you there. Yeah.
We're going to do it. We're going to meet there. We're just going to rip a bunch of, dank ganj, and then we're just going to go home. It's just going to be like a little quick hangout. And then, cause that's
it's visiting one of Guy Fieri's restaurants. Like, you're not going to find that anywhere, but you're at a weird restaurant somewhere. You're like, trash can nachos. This is the one time I can eat those.
Yeah.
I guess that's what it is. And it'll be just like every other first time weed experience I go to, where I go, oh, I've got something better than this at home. But the experience is nice.
But we'll be stoned when we're flying back. That's what matters.
Right? Man, I think we did a pretty good job of covering everything today. I'd like to get into the smoke spot, let Tom give us his delivery here, and then we can move on. So this is Tom Different with his favorite smoke spot from back in the day. And I encourage anyone who's listening, hit up Amanda or I and give us a little voice recording of your favorite smoke spot. Maybe it's back in the day. Maybe it's, where you first fell in love with cannabis. Maybe it's now. Maybe it's an alcove at work that you can get out to, and it's just behind the cameras and you can smoke there and no one's up your pants about getting back to work. So here's Tom, and then we'll come back and close out the show.
Hey Amanda, thank you so much for having me on your podcast today and letting me share my favorite smoking spot with you guys. My favorite smoking spot actually has a little bit of nostalgia to it, because it's a spot where I always used to smoke when I was a teenager, and that is my rooftop back home in Germany. I always was hiding away from my parents and my neighbors and like anyone who I didn't wanted to know that I'm smoking weed, because cannabis was still illegal in Germany back then. And yeah, so I was hiding away. We had huge trees around our garden, so I was really covered and hidden away. Especially I was always blazing at night, so I was just sitting in the darkness on my rooftop surrounded by trees. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why from these days on I just always love blazing on the rooftop. Even in my apartment here in Victoria right now, I can even climb on the roof as well, and I do that quite frequently actually, because it's a really lovely sunset from here, and because each time I smoke on a rooftop, it just brings back the good old memories of smoking weed when it was still illegal back home in Germany. And yeah, I can't wait to travel home one day to smoke back on my roof again. And yeah, thanks so much guys for having me share this little experience with you.
So that was awesome. Me and Tom are colleagues. He's one of a name in cannabis here in Canada. And I think what I love most about his smoking spot is that it hits on what we've been talking about. Cannabis is international. His favorite spot is his home in Germany. And that has memories for him. This plant has no borders. And I also just think it's so nice that like a lot of the smoking spots we've been sent are people's secret smoking spots from when they were younger, like their parents' roof. And I just love that.
Oh yeah. Like right now, if you're a parent, go check the roof. It's probably littered with roaches. And yeah, hey, if your kid is smoking THCO, introduce them to better herb when
Yeah.
they're of an appropriate age, please.
Completely agree. Well, I guess that's it for today.
Yeah, give us like your contacts. How do we get a hold of you?
Okay, so actually, yeah, this week's been exciting. I got a new blog post on my website. It's emeraldtempleliving.com. And I wrote a bit about my trip to Colorado and some of the flavors and cannabis I tried there. And also, there's a blog post about my visit to the International Church of Cannabis, which we didn't really get a chance to talk about today, but it's so cool. And I wrote about it in a vibrant description. And I also have a really in-depth post about THCO. So definitely jump on my website, check out the blog, and check out some of my posts about my trip to the States.
Awesome. Yeah, and look me up for my cannabis reviews and my like daily espressos and my story posts on Instagram. I'm at the Loud 100, and you know, Amanda and I are both pretty shadow banned, so you probably have to type in the whole name to find us. It's fun being in cannabis on social media these days.
Yeah.
Amanda, did you give your tag already?
It's at emerald.temple.living.
Nice. And if you need to find the podcast, we're at the dot smoking spot. Find us there. We're adding content on the weekly, and expect another episode next week. Come join us then.
Smoke it up, pull it down, and don't ever stop. Well, you can always find your smoking spot. Yeah, you can always find your smoking spot.